Welcome back to a little bit of cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm your host, Cody Depius, and I'd like to welcome you here on Valentine's Day here in 2025. Just got back from a coffee date with my lovely fiance, our last Valentine's Day as fiancés, but we got a lot of great Wisconsin sports news this week. Not a whole lot of action going on this weekend. Of course, we're post-Super Bowl. We're pre-spring training games. We are All-Star break. So you have the All-Star game festivities for the NBA, but that is the major extent of what's going on this weekend, aside from Wisconsin taking on Purdue tomorrow for college basketball. So some big-time action there. You have number 16 in the country, Wisconsin, at number 7, Purdue. That game will be at noon. We'll talk about that game a little bit on the pod. But we do have some news to cover coming in from this week. The Milwaukee Brewers had their pitchers and catchers report 2 days ago on Wednesday. So we got some news coming in from that yesterday. It was announced that Freddie Peralta is going to be the opening day starter for the second year in a row. This comes to no surprise for any Brewers fans. Freddie has been that guy ever since Corbin Burnes left. We all knew that the ball was going to be handed to Freddie. He's expected to be the ace to whatever extent that you want to believe that he can be the ace. And we understand that he can. We've seen him pitch to a great, great level where he received Cy Young votes back in 2021 along with Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burnes all in the same season. That was a great three-headed monster, and you saw that team just falter when it came to the playoffs. But we've seen a very good Freddie Peralta. He's been with the team for a very long time. He got a really solid contract when he was a young pitcher. They signed him to a 5-year deal, and he's getting towards the end of that contract. But a guy that's been there, a guy that they have trusted, and a guy that they trusted enough, regardless of his lackluster performance, I'll call it, last season, got the ball in Game 1 of the Wild Card Series. Did not pitch great. He got better as the game went along, but I still believe 3 earned runs in 4 innings. They had to give the ball to the bullpen in the 5th, and the bullpen unable to get the job done. That's if you want to go back and learn about that game, we do have a podcast on it from way back ago. But Freddie Peralta, as expected, named the opening day starter once again for the Brewers. We have some other news from the pitching staff. Brandon Woodruff is, quote, progressing. He hasn't faced any setbacks over the course of his rehabilitation, of course, coming off of that shoulder surgery. But we're uncertain at what point he's going to start pitching to live hitters. It is announced that he is going to be throwing a bullpen for the first time, I believe, since 2023, today on Friday. So we'll get some feedback over the course of the weekend to see how that went, I'm sure. And I'm sure that Pat Murphy is going to be giving us a lot of feedback over the course of spring training here, as the Brewers rotation right now, that starting 5, has a question mark in the number 5 spot. And that is elucidated even further with this other news that D.L. Hall has been shut down for possibly several weeks here. He has a lat strain. Not quite sure what happened, but not something you wanted to see for a young pitcher who was looked at as a competitor for that number 5 spot in the Milwaukee rotation. So Brandon Woodruff, we don't know when he's going to be back. We don't know how good he's going to be. We've seen him pitch as well as anybody in baseball, which a trivia question right now, which I can give you the answer to. The MLB pitcher with the lowest ERA in the decade of the 2020s so far is Brandon Woodruff. So in this decade, he's been that guy. But, of course, now dealing with all the injuries, he had the surgery. We'll see how things progress here. But the big news here is no setbacks. Of course, we have to understand that it's hard to put any expectations of when he's going to be able to get back into that rotation, when he's going to be at fully 100%. Shoulders, very, very touchy. We've talked about it multiple times here on the podcast, but it's a tough thing to come back from. I know of it personally. Like, I had a shoulder surgery. Sam has had some shoulder stuff as well. Shoulders suck. And especially when you are a pitcher, and that is where you make your livelihood. He is one of the best pitchers on planet Earth when that shoulder is healthy. To have that stripped from you and have to go under the knife for it, it can change your entire life. And we'll see how Brandon can fight back. But as we all know, he's got that bulldog inside of him where if anybody's going to be able to come back from that and find a way to get back to the strength that he was before he got hurt, it's going to be a guy with the mentality of a Brandon Woodruff. So, of course, we're all rooting for him. And I would expect that we see, and I know I said it's hard to put expectations on this, but I expect that we see Brandon Woodruff on the mound in the first half of the 2025 season. We'll see how that all plays out. I hate that I now put a timetable on it, but I love to hear that he's still progressing, hasn't seen any setbacks. We did see a plateau at the end of last season towards September when they expected for him to be throwing a bullpen. As stated before, he hasn't thrown one until what we're seeing now. It's just sometimes these things take a little bit longer. You have to build up the strength. And we have no idea what the fastball velocity is going to look like, how the slider spin rate is going to look, what the changeup's going to look like, and how that's all going to mix together with this shoulder. That is not going to be 100%. I think we can put the expectation that you're not going to get the electric arm that you saw when Brandon Woodruff was a healthy 27 years old that was blowing by hitters. He's now 32, not that same pitcher. He's dealing with an injury. He is older as well. Very rarely do you see arms get better. I mean, it does happen with your legends, and we'll see if Brandon Woodruff can find a way to get back to it, but that's even without an injury. He's dealing with a very serious injury where it's not an elbow, it's not a knee, where they know exactly what's going to happen. You have an exact timetable with it. Shoulders are weird. A lot of stuff going on there, and the doctors, they can't put a timetable on it. That's how much things can change. Where he was supposed to be throwing a bullpen back in September, he didn't have any setbacks. We're not seeing him throw a bullpen until today. That's how these things can get weird, which is why me telling you that he's probably going to throw in the first half, you can essentially throw that right out your window or wherever you're sitting right now. Go find your door, open it, and take my statement there, and you can just throw it out because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what I would bet on. All that matters is that he continues to get better and that he can contribute in some capacity for this Brewers rotation. And even just having him in the clubhouse like they did last year, him serving that mentorship role brings a lot of value to this club as well. He's just one of those guys that takes the younger pitchers under his wing, and you could see him with the camera on him in the dugout last year, always talking to a Tobias Myers, and of course always talking with his friend Freddie Peralta. He's there for the guys. He helps that entire rotation just with his presence. And of course we talk about the DL Hall shutdown. He's a guy that was going to be able to compete for that number 5 spot. So we're not sure if it's going to be him, but opening day, we know at this point that he's essentially not going to be able to throw because shutting him down, he's not throwing any bullpens. He's not really doing any baseball activity, maybe trying to stay in shape, maybe doing some cardio, but with that lat strain, the throwing is out the window. He's not doing a whole lot in that sense. So this number 5 spot, as we were talking about, was the top 4 for Milwaukee right now in the starting rotation. Freddie Peralta at 1, Nestor Cortez and Tobias Myers will be at 2 and 3, and then Aaron Savali will be in that 4 spot. And number 5, as talked about with both of these injuries, it's kind of a toss-up. I was hoping in the offseason that Wade Miley could be a guy that would do it for Milwaukee, but he's no longer on the team. He's over in Cincinnati now. Colin Ray was the guy who filled that spot and did okay last year. He's now going to pitch for the Chicago Cubs, and I'm sure that Milwaukee finds a way to wallop him. So he's an option that's out the window. You have the Woodruff and the DL Hall injuries. Aaron Ashby, I think, is the next guy up right now at this moment in time. I think he's a competitor for it. Carlos Rodriguez, who we saw a little bit coming up from AAA last year, did not pitch great. I think he only pitched 3 2/3 in the one ball game that he did start, was not major league ready. I don't expect for him to get on the mound in that spot, but when things get thin, you have to go out on a limb. Logan Henderson, a 22-year-old that was able to fly through the minor league rankings for Milwaukee last year. He started the year in single A, ended up in triple A. If he finds a lot of progression, maybe he gets an opportunity there. Jacob Mizorowski is the big name, of course. We talked about him quite a bit. Has one of the best fastballs I think I've ever seen, a wipeout slider. The kid's got electric stuff. stuff I think that is going to be really electric in the back end of a bullpen. I think he's going to help Milwaukee out in that sense. They did the same thing with Josh Hader and Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta's pitched in the bullpen as well. The start guys out in Milwaukee with those high-end arms, they like to have them in the bullpen and see if they stick there. And if you can, you're going to try to progress them into a starter role. If it happens, it happens. But with the velocity at 100-plus miles an hour, to be able to keep that up for 5 or 6 innings, there's not many guys on planet Earth that can do that. So the chances would tell you that Jacob Mizorowski probably isn't one of those guys that's going to be able to stay healthy by throwing 102 miles an hour for 6 innings. I think they like his stuff out of the bullpen. I think most people do. That's where I expect they try to start him. So at this point right now, I'd say Aaron Ashby is that front runner for the number 5 spot. But another contender for that spot was signed this week. The third major league free agent signing for Milwaukee, all 3 of them being pitchers. The last one coming this week, I believe on Thursday, Tyler Alexander signing a 1-year, $1 million deal for the Brewers. Pitched in Tampa Bay last year. He kind of had that swing role that we saw out of a Bryce Wilson for Milwaukee, where he can pitch in the bullpen one day, he can start on another day. So he's been able to start games in the major leagues. That's at least a plus compared to the other guys that I've mentioned in competition for that number 5 spot. He's a left-hander. He's got a great mustache. And if Milwaukee goes out and picks him up, there's probably something in that arm that other teams don't see. And Chris Hook said, hey, that guy, I want to see how you get him to throw this. And then he just finds a way to magically turn them into an all-star caliber pitcher. So the 3 free agents that Milwaukee has signed, they are all pitchers as stated. Tyler Alexander, he can start. Elvin Rodriguez as a reliever, and Grant Wolfram also a reliever. They signed each of those guys for 1-year contracts, and each of them for $1 million or less. So not a lot of money spent on the table for Milwaukee at this point. This is kind of the expectation. And Sam's take on this, and it's something I'm leaning towards because my inner fan wants me to be frustrated at the fact that my favorite major league team doesn't want to go spend money when you have a couple of obvious holes on this roster, the one being third base. Not quite sure how they're going to fill that. And then now with the injuries, and this is without either of the top 4 starters being injured, that starting rotation for Milwaukee, I think there might be a hole there. And you always like extra depth. And Milwaukee haven't signed a position player. They have trust in the guys that they have. Yes, I understand that more guys are going to be healthy this year, and you expect for that to happen, but who knows how long they all stay healthy. You're going to need extra depth. I don't think going out and signing an extra guy in that infield would be a bad idea because Joey Ortiz was not able to stay healthy all last season. At third base, you don't even have your opening day starter named yet. You don't know who it is. It might be an Oliver Dunn. It might be a Caleb Durbin. Who knows? But they haven't taken a flyer on any of those guys in free agency. Not like there were a lot of candidates, but Sam, his take was that it's good that they didn't go and try to force something that wasn't there. So I'll be with Sam. I'll stay optimistic about it. But Milwaukee, now with pitchers and catchers reporting already, spring training on the horizon, not a lot to show in that free agency signing with the money spent, which I understand the financial position for the Milwaukee Brewers is nothing like a market in LA or New York. We fully understand that. But less than $3 million have been spent in free agency. And in the year 2025, when your owner has a net worth of $700 million plus, I think you could maybe fork over a little bit more. But we'll see how things happen. Of course, this isn't the end of free agency. This isn't the end of any of the deals that are going to be made for Milwaukee. I don't think this roster is final, but I do think it's really close. So, news out of Arizona for Brewers Spring Training with pitchers and catchers reporting. The Milwaukee Bucks a big win on Wednesday over the Minnesota Timberwolves. The final score 103-101. No Dame, no Giannis in this game. Not a lot of high expectations. This is a Minnesota team that you saw go quite far, I believe, to the conference finals last year with the leader of that team being Anthony Edwards. Edwards shot 17 three-point attempts yesterday, only knocked down 4 of them. So the lackluster three-point shooting, a big reason Minnesota lost this game. But you want to talk about the positives of this game as Milwaukee Bucks fans. And the biggest one here is Kyle Kuzma being the star of this game. 19 points, 13 rebounds, just coming to Milwaukee after the Chris Middleton trade. Of course, a lot of people having some arguments of whether Kuzma was going to be able to bring any value, which we haven't come to a conclusion yet. But you start to get a little glimpse of the effect and the impact that Kyle Kuzma can have on this team. You have a solid scorer. He's not a great shooter, but he's a good scorer. He can get inside, and he's going to help on this rebound front. He is tall. He's 6'10". He can go up, and he can grab the rebounds, and that's something that Milwaukee has struggled with to this point this year. So you like to see him have a sort of game like that where he kind of led this team to a solid victory without the top two superstars out there on the floor for him. Gary Trent Jr. adding another 21 points, and Kevin Porter Jr. off the bench, solid performance for him. 11 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists in 22 minutes. Him and Ryan Rollins are going to be competing for that backup point guard spot, especially when it comes down to the playoffs. I think Porter is a lot more explosive on the offensive end. I think he has a higher ceiling on defense as well. But, of course, the character issues will always bring up a question mark with him. You don't know how long he's going to be able to stay on this roster. He's one of those guys that with multiple chances that he's had, he's blown it. And you're just hoping with Milwaukee he doesn't blow it, but you can't count on a guy that has the kind of track record that he does to be able to be on your team long term. That's why they just traded away Marjon Beauchamp, because Beauchamp had no value to this roster. They didn't want to play him at all. So they said, a player that doesn't play on this team, go take a flyer, get a high ceiling guy, and see what he can happen. Of course, character, talk about the question marks, but you hope that he continues to keep the nose to the grindstone, stay going forward, keep the character in check, and you could see a lot of good things out of a Kevin Porter Jr. So just hoping that continues to go in the right direction. I do briefly want to mention this, how a lot of people on Twitter are kind of giving Damian Lillard a lot of flack because he missed that game on Wednesday, and I understand that. The Milwaukee Bucks right now are in the 5 seed. They are just a couple games out from being in the play-in tournament. They're right there, right behind the 4 seed. Like, they have the opportunity to move up a couple of spots or drop all the way down to the play-in tournament. And I can tell you, the play-in tournament, a bad gut feeling from me. I don't think that would be good for this team at all. Just one bad night could ruin a season. And Damian Lillard decided on Wednesday, and this also may have been with the advice of the training staff and the coaching staff in Milwaukee, so I'm not going to put the entire decision on Damian Lillard. But he did not play on Wednesday, but did say he was going to compete in the three-point contest this weekend and the All-Star Game festivities. So a lot of fans saying, oh, we know where Dame Lillard's priorities are, and I think I'm okay with the fact that he took an extra day of rest, because a NBA game does not have the same physical toll on a body as a three-point contest or the unathletic All-Star Game festivities that we now see today, where they can score 400 points in a singular game, as I think last year's total was up to 397 between the two teams. It's not a game where guys are going all out on the floor in any sense. So Dame Lillard, he's going to go out and he's going to have some fun this weekend. I'm okay with him taking the extra rest, and I will also say I think it, in the end, after it came out in the wash, a positive. You got to see a little bit more of a Kevin Porter Jr. You got to see a little bit more of a Kuzma. You gave a little bit extra shots to Gary Trent Jr., and he's been executing. He has been great on the offensive end as of recent. So you give those guys an extra opportunity. You hand the ball off to them. Just give them a chance to improve. And I think the Bucks started to see that a little bit on Wednesday. Giannis, he's going to be out for possibly a couple of weeks was the report. He has a calf strain. And Lillard dealing with the hamstring. He should be back immediately after the All-Star Game festivities. They will be back next Thursday. The New York Jets have announced on all their social media accounts that they are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. This comes to no surprise, as Aaron Glenn, the new head coach for the Jets, said he doesn't want Rodgers on this team if he's going to continue to hop on Pat McAfee's show. And Rodgers, I don't think, is going to listen to anybody else tell him what to do. And so I'm sure that was an interesting conversation in the head coach room, and they decided and announced that they are moving in a different direction at quarterback. So the big question, and I'm sure Sam and I will get a lot of opportunities to talk about this, is where is Aaron Rodgers going to be next year? Does he retire? Does he go to Pittsburgh? Does he fulfill the Brett Favre prophecy and wind up in Minnesota? Only time will tell, but now we get to watch that saga and possibly some more Netflix documentary episodes coming from this. Who knows? I would definitely turn it on if it happens. Come on, Aaron, just continue to create this storyline as one of our heroes here in the state of Wisconsin. Rodgers, I mean, we're going to talk about him. If you got a Super Bowl ring at quarterback for the Green Bay Packers, a little bit of cheese is going to give you a little bit of time. And that's the way that I'll put that. The Jets moving on from Rodgers and his future now in question. As stated before, the Wisconsin Badgers basketball team will be at Purdue. Purdue having a very solid season coming off of that national championship appearance last year. A lot of people weren't sure, myself included, how this team was going to be able to bounce back after losing one of the best players in college basketball last year in Zach Edey. Well, the Boilermakers have found a way to kind of shut all of us up. They are 19-6 at this point. They're at the tops in the Big Ten, number 7 in the nation. I will say this week, though, they are coming off of a tough loss, 75-73 at Michigan. Now, Michigan, no slouch of a team. Wisconsin, they lost to them at Michigan as well, where the Wolverines ranked number 20 in the nation. But that's the game for Purdue right before they play Wisconsin. And Purdue's going to be at home. They're going to be tough. They're going to be a little bit ticked off coming off of that loss. I think this is going to be a really tough environment to play for Wisconsin. With that being said, this is an opportunity for Wisconsin to leapfrog here in the rankings, to leapfrog here in the Big Ten standings. Both of these teams have similar records. Wisconsin, they're ranked 16th. To take down a number 7 conference opponent at home, be a quad 1 win, of course, and probably one of the biggest wins of the season if they could get to that point. I think it's going to be very tough. The 2 players to key in on here for Purdue, the offensive players at least. Braden Smith, point guard, 16.4 points per game, 8.7 assists. That leads the nation. And Trey Kaufman-Renn having a great year inside, 19 points per game. So Wisconsin is shown to not be as tough inside to be able to stop a player like a Kaufman-Renn. So those are going to be the 2 players to key in on for Purdue. I think Wisconsin, we said it before, they have the opportunity to beat anybody with the way that they can shoot the ball and how efficient they can be on offense. I think one of the top 10, maybe even top 5 offenses in the entire nation for Wisconsin. So they have to continue to keep that high pace, force some tough shots for Purdue, and try to keep that crowd quiet as long as you can. But Purdue, they're going to be there, they're going to be loud, and they're going to be ticked off coming off that tough loss against Michigan. All the great news coming in this week. We'll have that Badger game on tomorrow, and I will be back on Monday with another episode. I'm Cody Depius. I'd like to thank you for being here with us once again. So we'll see you next time on A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.